LiberalViewer presents.
So based on the comments and messages I've gotten from viewers asking me to make this video, some may be surprised to hear me agree with a recent holding from the U.S. Supreme Court declaring, quote, "The government may not suppress political speech on the basis of the speaker's corporate identity," unquote. And that may be because I've seen some mischaracterize this ruling as being about whether corporations are persons, and that's something of a red herring because first, if you want to be able to sue corporations or charge them with crimes, then at least for those purposes corporations need to be legally treated like people, and secondly, corporations have never had all the rights of a person because corporations cannot get married, cannot be murdered, and have no right of habeas corpus, and finally, and maybe most importantly, while corporations are not actually people, they are associations of people, and those people still have free speech rights, which is, again, why the Supreme Court held that when those people speak, quote, "the government may not suppress political speech on the basis of the speaker's corporate identity," unquote. And my agreement with this recent decision by the Supreme Court not only separates me from some of my viewers and some of my friends on the left, but it puts me in agreement with people with whom I don't normally agree, like South Carolina's Republican Senator Jim Let's Break Obama DeMint, appearing on ABC's This Week last Sunday, who is apparently so used to insulting the Democratic Party by calling it the Democrat Party that he actually insulted the democratic process itself, as you can see in this clip.
We can't promote freedom and democracy by repressing free speech. That's not the way to do it. I think people should be able to come together in associations and organizations and spend money to get their message out. I think that's going to promote the democrat process instead of really what we've got now is we essentially give the labor unions carte blanche over our system, grassroots as well as spending. I think this will give businesses a chance to participate in the process as well as associations.
Now, I actually agree with the first half of that statement, all the way up to where he referred to the Democrat process, though everything after that was pretty much wrong, and the misanalysis of this issue seems to come from all sides because ABC political analyst Sam Donaldson later on that same ABC program spread a common misconception about the Supreme Court ruling, claiming it allows unlimited corporate contributions directly to political candidates, as you can see in this clip.
Here's what the Supreme Court has said. Let's take Mr. Blankfein, who's in charge of Goldman Sachs. He can only give $2,400 of his own money directly to a candidate. But now Goldman Sachs can give millions directly.
Yet even when ABC host Jim Moran interrupted to correct Sam Donaldson by pointing out the ruling does nothing to remove limits on contributions to candidates, but actually removes a law against spending by corporations on certain kinds of political expressions in the 60 days before an election, Sam Donaldson somehow ended up back making the same erroneous point that you can see here.
But they can spend it and say, this man, Barney Frank, has gone too far to trying to restrict us. Let's defeat him. Vote for X. But Blankfein can't give but $2,400. Now, what sense does that make to say that a corporation, a legal entity, has freedom of speech to give all this money, but I don't?
But again, individuals can spend unlimited amounts of their own money on political expression and even on their own political campaigns, which, by the way, has never guaranteed victory even for independently wealthy candidates like Ross Perot, Steve Forbes, and Mitt Romney, and more importantly, the corporations that are going to want to spend money expressing political opinions are not going to be the big blue-chip firms that want to stay away from controversy and sell to everyone. The people who will most likely be freed up to speak for corporations will be speaking for non-profit corporations like Planned Parenthood, the NRA, and the Sierra Club, a point conservative columnist George Will made in that same ABC discussion here.
Some people say, well, corporations, that means Microsoft will be buying ads. Microsoft's trying to sell software. They're not interested in getting into political fights. What this really emancipates are non-profit advocacy corporations, such as the Sierra Club. I picked that not at random because the Sierra Club was fined $28,000 in Florida last year for falling afoul of the incomprehensible, that thick set of regulations on our political speech.
So this Supreme Court decision did strike down a significant regulation on political speech, and George Will's point that big for-profit corporations won't want to make controversial political ads got support from, of all places, The Daily Show, where Jon Stewart and his writers generally seem to disagree with the Supreme Court decision, but still made the parody commercial showing why corporate advertisers won't want to get political that you can see here.
What's up? It's me, the E-Trade baby, here to tell you about the stock market. Because I wasn't aborted. Think how much money you would have lost if I had been aborted and wasn't here to tell you about E-Trade. So don't vote for Dianne Feinstein. She wants me dead.
At E-Trade.
Let's go! That is a cute baby!
And I think that cute baby demonstrates why for-profit corporations are generally going to be interested in, well, profit, which won't come from making partisan ads, but of course that's not to say that corporate money doesn't already have a big warping influence on the way political decisions are made in America, but that has more to do with the lack of a public financing system for campaigns than it does with any independent expenditures by outside groups, which is why law professor Lawrence Lessig, who spent a lot of time in the copyright area fighting for fair use, starting up the Creative Commons system, but who's now started the Change Congress group dedicated to limiting the influence of financial contributions on congressional decision-making, and who initially reacted to his first reading of the Supreme Court decision last week, vlogging in an airport to say,
I don't think the point here is that corporations should be silenced. I think the point is we need a political system where people can trust that the decisions Congress makes are decisions based on the merits, on what makes sense or what the people in their district want, and not what the funders demand. This decision will only exacerbate the current problems with this system. And the way we should respond is by pushing for an alternative that gets us a system for funding elections that doesn't lead people to wonder whether it's money rather than sense that is producing a political result.
And Professor Lessig had a specific piece of legislation in mind that's already in Congress that he went on to describe here.
The Fair Elections Now Act. This would establish citizen-funded elections where candidates can receive up to $100 from any citizen and also money provided from the state whenever they establish certain credibility in a campaign. If we had that alternative, even if corporations were participating in the political speech market by saying whatever they wanted to say, people could believe that it was the merits of the decision and not the money that was driving the result.
And that's generally been my reaction too, but unfortunately, by this week, Professor Lessig had actually changed his mind, sending out an email in which he not only continued advocating for the Fair Elections Now Act, but in which he also now calls for a constitutional amendment because of his fear that an activist Supreme Court might strike down any reforms. But I'm very hesitant to monkey around with the First Amendment for any reason, and my worry is only increased by the report in the New York Sun last weekend that the American Civil Liberties Union held a national board meeting to consider changing its campaign finance policy, despite the ACLU having submitted a brief supporting the winning side in this recent Supreme Court case. Now, the ACLU has been the nation's leading advocate for First Amendment free speech rights for the last 90 years, and I've been a member of the ACLU almost a third of that time, so when the ACLU considers changing its policy, just like when a learned professor like Lawrence Lessig changes his mind, it certainly makes me reconsider whether solving this problem just through the public financing of campaigns is a realistic hope, and that hope was not encouraged by the way President Barack Obama addressed this issue in his otherwise pretty good first State of the Union address that included a vague mention of a bill to correct these problems that you can see here.
With all due deference to separation of powers, last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections. I don't think American elections should be bankrolled by America's most powerful interests, or worse, by foreign entities. They should be decided by the American people. And I'd urge Democrats and Republicans to pass a bill that helps correct some of these problems.
The president kind of trailed off there at the end and didn't even mention the Fair Elections Now Act or anything specific, leaving me with little hope he's going to be leading an effort for public campaign financing anytime soon, but I'm still not giving up, and I'm still not convinced that ACLU policies or the U.S. Constitution need any changing, but I want to know what you think. Is the public financing of political campaigns the best hope for limiting the influence of money on politics while still protecting the First Amendment freedom of speech? And if not, how would you suggest limiting the influence of money on politics in a way that would not suppress anyone's right of free speech?
I YouTube, you decide.